All right, hello everyone. On behalf of the US ECOP node, we just wanted to welcome everyone to today's session. It's the very first of our webinars in our webinar series where we're kind of navigating careers across different ocean sectors. So my name is Emily. I'm one of the co-chairs for the US ECOP node. I am a freshwater scientist by training, so I don't have a marine science background. So hopefully this kind of starts this theme of, some non-traditional backgrounds. I grew up in Northwest Indiana, about 20 minutes away from Lake Michigan. So I feel really kind of like a mini Great Lakes Midwest expert. I did my undergrad in Southern Ohio, and then I did grad school in Chicago. So I feel like I've covered a lot of different Great Lakes states right there. So I'm really excited to be your moderator for the next hour. And like I said, the goal of the series is really just to highlight different career pathways. So we have 4 panelists here that will be talking to you guys about their different roles, their journeys that they've taken, everything from government agencies, shaping policy, to kind of more private sector spaces, driving things like innovation and sustainable practices, including then some nonprofit career pathways as well. So our aim is to kind of show you a very, very broad spectrum of possibilities that are available to you as an early career ocean professional. Equally as important, we don't want this just to be people talking on a screen to you. We don't want this just to be a set of presentations, but we are kind of imagining this series to be an interactive space where you can engage directly with these professionals throughout this hour and then hopefully a little bit afterwards. So we want you to ask them questions and kind of gain some insights about some opportunities and challenges from different career pathways. So whether you're just at the beginning of your career like I am, or whether you're hoping to maybe pivot or do something else, we're hoping, you get something out of these presentations in the next hour. So to kick things off, we want to get to know everyone here a little bit better. So we have a Mentimeter link that Casey is now posting in the chat. So please take a look and fill out those quick questions really, really fast. We want to know where you're joining from, what sector are you working in, or what are you interested in maybe working in, and then what do you hope to gain from this webinar? So we'll share those responses live, hopefully in just a moment. Be nice. Have some people from around the country, not just the Great Lakes, which is super interesting. Okay, awesome. Very cool. So I'm really glad that everyone from all these different places is able to join us. This is super interesting. Love to see some people from Indiana, and then also from Silver Spring in DC, where I am sitting right now. Awesome. And yeah, what sector are you currently working in or most interested in? All right. Also kind of a wide range from academia, government, nonprofits. These are all sectors I'm also really interested in, and I'm totally unsure which one I'm most interested in. So also really interested to hear what our speakers are talking about today. And then before we start with our presentations, our last question is, what do you hope to gain from this webinar? Can be anything from new connections or a piece of advice. Awesome. Networking, pivoting careers, new ideas. I think that's what's most helpful for me is talking to people and just seeing like the wide breadth of careers that are out there, because honestly, even just at NOAA and at some government agencies, people are doing just a wide range of different things. So awesome. Love this. Okay. I feel like we've gotten to know each other better. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce today's panelists. So each one of them, they're going to share a little bit about their career path, some key decisions that they made, some pivots, some lessons that they learned, and then they'll share some advice. So to start, we will go ahead with Katie. And Katie can also give herself a really nice introduction, but she is from the Great Lakes Observing System. So excited to hear what you have to share, Katie.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Katie Rousseau. I'm our Strategic Initiatives Manager at the Great Lakes Observing System, or GLOS, as I'll probably mention it throughout the presentation. I've been at GLOS for 6 years now, and I work in a remote office just outside of Toledo, Ohio. Next slide. So how the Great Lakes Observing System kind of fits into your ocean theme. We are one of 11 regional associations underneath the Integrated Ocean and Observing System. Um, all 11 are not the same kind of entity. Some are nonprofits, some work under academic institutions. So we all kind of vary. We all have our own boards and directions, and you can see all of those in there. Next slide. So early days, I'm a lover of nature. My mom always took us to parks. I was a Girl Scout. In high school, I participated in what was called the Student Watershed Watch, and it still is today, where we kind of deployed on local creeks and streams and collected water quality data. And so that was kind of like my first hands-on experience, which impacted my future career. And then in college, I took a lot of cultural classes, but then really focused on hard sciences. Later in my, uh, I guess in years, we had to take like a senior capstone class, and that was conservation in the US. And that's where kind of my eyes opened with advocacy and campaigns and things like that. So that really affected me. But I ended up getting my BS in education for teaching earth space science for 7 through 12. And so I moved to Maryland and I taught ninth grade for about 2 years. And I realized at that point that, I liked the science more than the act of teaching. And I found myself going home quite often just for family and friends, like events and things like that. So I made the decision, kind of my first pivot was to move back home after 2 years and take an internship for geographic information systems without really any experience, but having some sort of background. My personal contacts back at home helped me get that position. So make sure you utilize those when you can. And then after working there for about a year, I ended up going from an intern to having a full-time position. I decided to go back to the University of Toledo to pursue my master's and get my GIS certificate because that was really interesting to me. And so then that helped me with my thesis, which focused on the Maumee watershed and utilizing GIS. Next slide. I think we are missing a slide in there. Can you go back one? Oh,
Oh no, Katie.
oh.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So just stay there for a second.
Okay.
So I guess after my master's, I ended up finding a position with American Rivers, which is a national environmental NGO who had gotten some grant funding to do some work in the Great Lakes, specifically in the Maumee watershed, which is where Toledo is. And so they were looking for a program manager to do a lot of that work. It aligned with my recent degree and kept me in the Toledo area. Here I worked on green infrastructure projects, utilized my GIS skills in some of their most endangered river reports, if you're familiar with them. I was hired as a conservation associate, kind of like the bottom, and then moved up to associate director and then director of the Clean Water Program for the Great Lakes region. I worked for them for about 12 years. But then over time, my work was less focused in the local region. And so I was working in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Gary, Indiana, Cleveland, because that's where, because we were primarily foundation funded, um, some of that work changed and had to expand. And so I was less in my region and there's a lot more travel. And given that, I family life kind of started, I had small children at the time, and I was looking to pivot yet again because I wanted to be home a little bit more because I was traveling quite a bit. So, a former colleague of mine who I met at American Rivers and worked for the Nature Conservancy had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think I have the perfect position for you. Do you want to come work for me at Gloss? Because I'm putting together a new initiative." So that's how I got my job at Gloss. Next slide. So when I started at Gloss, I was the Smart Great Lakes liaison. So we were building an initiative with scientists, policymakers, folks in the marine tech industry, um, to put together an initiative to basically move a common strategy forward. So my job was to coordinate all of that, getting that together, and we hosted congressional briefings. We put together surveys. One of the initiatives that came out of the common strategy was the Indigenous Great Lake Network Initiative. So I continue to support that. But as far as that sort of work, it's more coordination and project management. Next slide. So about 2 years ago, um, the Smart Great Lakes Initiative, while it's still existing, it's been less of my time. And so 2 years ago, we decided to rescope my position into a strategic initiatives manager. Where I sit is in our communications department. Gloss is a very small nonprofit. We have about 10 people and we're growing, but it's very small. And so I do a lot of our event planning. If there's like a meeting, if there's a big meeting that comes to the Great Lakes and they want, some local representatives on it, I'm usually the person that gets asked. Um, we're now working with a lot of Indigenous communities and hosting some of those meetings. Um, and then there was a time where we were looking for our new communication specialist where I had to pick up the slack on that. And I really had to learn on the job, like putting together our monthly newsletters, doing some of our live streams and things like that. So it was a learning experience, but I did then get to get that at least have those skills to then train our new person in what we do. And then I also help with video production. Next slide. And then what I really like to do, which comes from the advocacy that I did at American Rivers with the Healing Our Waters Coalition, I was on their governance board for a number of years, was reaching out to our congressional folks. And so what I do is a lot of email correspondence, building relationships. As most of you probably know, there's a lot of turnover in DC, so there's a lot of re-education for the offices for the new folks, and making sure that the leave behinds are the messages that we want to share. And so I've developed our program kind of from like reaching out to 6 offices to really covering every single office on the House and Senate side, and really just trying to build those relationships. And so when I mentioned the congressional briefing from the Smart Great Lakes Initiative, one thing that came out of that was Michigan Representative Lisa McLean contacted our office about working with them to put together the Great Lakes Mapping Act, because only around 20% of the lakes are mapped to a higher standard, so high resolution. And it really needs to be done. So that was the first time I was able to help write testimony and then help write the legislation itself. So that you can see the picture of my boss doing the hearing in front of the Natural Resources Committee. Next slide. And then just a little bit of advice, your interests and priorities will evolve and change over time. Go with your gut on whether it's the right time to make a move in your career. Only you can decide what is the right work-life balance for you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. That was super, super interesting. I personally loved hearing about your advocacy work. When we get to our moderated Q&A session, we can hear more. So next we have Zach, who will be giving his presentation. And Zach, he can also give himself a very nice introduction, but he is coming from the McHenry County Conservation District.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Zach Canizzo. I am the Conservation Ecology Manager at the McHenry County Conservation District, and I've been here for 3 months. So we'll get into why that is as we go along with this presentation. But this picture, I like this picture because this is, some of you may be aware, this is the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. It doesn't look like this anymore. They actually got rid of and changed this big tank in the middle, but this is how I remember it as a kid. And the reason why I put this picture up here is because the Shedd Aquarium is really what got me into marine science and the ocean side of things. I always loved being outside, loved being in nature. And I was always drawn to fish in particular. So that's what really pointed me in the direction of an ocean career. But what it really came down to me was being in nature, being outside. I mean, in middle school and high school, I used to take odd jobs pulling weeds, that kind of thing, just to do something outside that would also allow me to, I mean, frankly, get money, because that's what a career is for, right? Love doing it, but you need that paycheck as well. Next slide. So that desire to be in the marine, ocean, water sciences led me to go get some advice as to what do I need to do to be in water science. And the advice I got was, well, you're probably going to need to go to graduate school, but first just go get a biology degree, either at a school that's good for biology or a large school. So I went here. This is the University of Wisconsin-Madison. For those who don't know, this is probably not the picture you would normally see if you looked it up, but I like this picture because this picture shows how it is right on Lake Mendota, which is a huge lake in Wisconsin. I will admit, I went here because I had that advice of go to a big university, get a biology degree, and I liked the school. Turns out that University of Wisconsin is one of the best places in the world for limnology, which is what I was going to learn about. Lake Mendota is arguably the best studied lake in the world. I got lucky, but I loved my time at University of Wisconsin. I got to learn biology, put myself on that path to really kind of go into the freshwater biology world, continue to try and work outside, to the point where I got a summer job at Home Depot just to be able to go outside. But this was kind of my career path up to this point. Was dabbling in whether or not I wanted to go into marine or freshwater, but definitely wanted to do science. And then I got to study abroad. Next slide. And during that study abroad, I got to go here. This is a really grainy, crappy picture of a site that if you look up the Galapagos Islands will come up. This is a grainy, crappy picture because it's my picture. I wanted to use it. Proof I was actually there. So while I was studying abroad, I was very fortunate to get to do this incredible program down in Ecuador that, because I was an out-of-state student at the University of Wisconsin, actually cost less than paying out-of-state tuition for a semester, incredibly. And one of the places we got to visit was the Galapagos, which really pushed me into going into marine over freshwater. I also got to spend a month during this internship working with a small marine protected area, just being on the ground, learning about that intersection of marine science and conservation. Conservation was always something in the back of my head, back of my mind. Really wanted to try and find that intersection of science and conservation at some point in my career. So I graduated University of Wisconsin, spent about a year and a half working for a small conservation organization near my hometown, doing restoration over the summers as I was trying to take a break and get ready to go to grad school. And then I went to grad school, next slide, at University of South Carolina. This is not South Carolina, this is Florida, but that's because I did my research in Florida. This was my office for every summer. I got to do some research in mangroves in South Carolina, focusing on a climate-related range shift. Now, I will say, I skipped over one of my first major decisions and kind of pivots in my career, and that was the decision as to where I was going to go to grad school. I agonized over that decision. I had two choices. I could go get my PhD either at Boston University, which is going to let me work on coral reefs, which is what I really kind of wanted to do, or University of South Carolina, which was going to be a little bit more up in the air. And ultimately, I chose University of South Carolina because I just jived better with the professor, and it was going to allow me to get my degree in likely a shorter period of time. So ultimately, it ended up being a great choice. I enjoyed my time there. I got to work on a climate-induced range shift into a new habitat. So it was a super interesting climate change related study. It was the first time I'd really worked on climate change. It had been, something I was aware of, but wasn't really front and center in my mind up to this point. But frankly, towards the end of my graduate degree, I got a little burned out. I went into my graduate degree because I saw myself on a career towards academia. I wanted to work in academia. I wanted to teach and do science, but I was getting burned out by the publish or perish of academia towards the end of my PhD. So I decided to take the opportunity to apply for the Knauss Marine Policy Fellowship, which is an outstanding fellowship that takes recent and current graduate students and brings them to DC to work for a year in either an administrative office or a congressional office. And I fully planned on going back to academia after that. So I did my Knauss Fellowship. I graduated from University of South Carolina with a PhD in marine science, and I'm firmly in marine science, and went to DC for a year for my Knauss Fellowship. So this is kind of like a pseudo pivot, still planning on going back, but went to DC, next slide, and ended up getting placed in the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries at NOAA. So this is our National Marine Sanctuary System. It is an incredible system. It is a number of large marine protected areas that are, as you can see, all over the country, federally managed, some of the most special ocean places that we have on Earth. I was very grateful to end up here, and I was going to be working on climate change. So next slide. My whole position in my fellowship was to kind of restart the National Marine Sanctuary Climate Change Program. This was in 2019. We were halfway through the first Trump administration. To be blunt, people were kind of picking their heads back up on the climate change thing. And I loved it. I found that I loved this work, loved being able to work at the intersection of climate change and policy, work on these big questions, and push policy and science forward in a way that also allowed me to work directly in conservation. So I decided to stay. And I would say that was the first major pivot in my career. And this would be my first piece of advice, is be open-minded about those potential pivots. I never saw myself working in government. I never saw myself working in anything other than academia. And I found something that I loved and decided to stay there. So next slide. I spent 6 years at NOAA working on climate change assessment and adaptation in the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries and for marine protected areas more broadly, nationally, internationally. I got to do a number of incredibly amazing things, work with incredible people from all over the world, working to incorporate climate change assessment and adaptation into conservation of the ocean. Some of the major pieces of work I got to work on were developing climate resilience plans that guided the National Marine Sanctuary's work, as well as a marine protected area climate vulnerability assessment guide. Got to work on climate vulnerability assessments, all of these incredible things. And it was really an incredible time working in an incredible office, doing work that I absolutely loved. I saw myself working in this position for the rest of my career. And then I was in Panama, the week of January 20th of this year, 2025, working on a climate change training for international marine protected area managers that was funded by USAID when there was a transition in administration. And that is, to be honest, really when things started changing. It became difficult to do my job. It was clear that the job that I had been doing over the past 6 years wasn't going to work anymore, wasn't really going to be existing anymore. So frankly, I started looking for other things. I had, in the long term, been trying to get back to the Midwest anyway, and I found a job opportunity that was incredible. It allowed me to come back to the Midwest to continue working in conservation, and that's where I am now. So I ultimately took that position. And next slide. Here I am now at the McHenry County Conservation District. So I am the Conservation Ecology Manager at the McHenry County Conservation District. I've come full circle. I'm no longer working in marine. I still do a lot of water-related work, but it's mostly freshwater and wetlands. So remember, I went to University of Wisconsin thinking I was going to go freshwater, left, went to marine. Now I'm back in freshwater and doing terrestrial and freshwater work. The job that I do now is in a leadership role. So I lead the team that, to describe it in a short way, is the science wing of our organization. We're a small local government. We manage about 30,000 acres in McHenry County, Illinois. I have 10 10 staff directly under me. We do all of the assessment, all of the surveying. We also run our volunteers and our working land, so our farm program for our organization. But we produce the information that allows us to manage these sites more effectively. So I went from working at that 30,000 foot level at NOAA down to working on the ground again. And it's enjoyable. I love it. One of the things I didn't get to do at NOAA was get into the field very often. I'm in the field at least once a week now. So huge pivot in my career, but it's a way, I think what it shows to me is kind of that winding path, and you can never really know where you're going, and to be open to those changes and follow what feels right. Oftentimes it might be an agonizing choice, but I mean, I agonized over this shift back to this career as well, but it was the right thing. I am back. I'm doing something I very much enjoy. It's allowing me to stay in conservation, allowing me to be in science, and I've carried things I've learned from each job to this job. And one of the things that I haven't said yet, that I hinted to, and you probably noticed my little diatribes over to, like, oh, I worked at Home Depot, I worked in pulling weeds. The reason why I wanted to put those in there is because you also never know what experiences are going to lead you towards a career. I worked pulling weeds over a few summers, literally just pulling weeds at local businesses. That got me a job at Home Depot when I was in college because I had experience with plants. That job at Home Depot, because I was in the garden department, got me a job at the small conservation organization that I worked at for 3 summers, which is this one, the McHenry County Conservation District. Literally was told, because I had experience working with chainsaws, I was able to get this job here. Because I had that job for 3 summers before going off to grad school, I was aware of this organization and kept an eye on this organization, and was thus was able to find this position when it became available and applied for it, and people remembered me here. I don't know how much, if at all, that had an effect on me getting this job, but I came back to this organization that I never would have been to in the first place if I hadn't been picking weeds over the summer or taken a job at Home Depot. So it's just this, be open to these unexpected career changes, be open to not knowing how one opportunity can lead to another and where it will ultimately get you. But that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. That was really, really interesting. Loved hearing about all your different pathways. And hopefully you guys are thinking of some questions for the end of our presentation. So with that, we still have 2 presentations to go. We will move right on to Stacy.
Man, those were so interesting. Thank you so much for inviting me as one of the panel participants. I love speaking about sort of my very non-linear, almost circular career path, especially with early career folks, because I think it's important. When I first started out, I had this expectation that everything would be neatly aligned, maybe a staircase to the top that I would navigate from getting a degree to, getting a job, getting a promotion, ruling the Great Lakes fishes. That's obviously not the case. My name is Stacy Fergal. I'm a Great Lakes Fisheries and Ecosystem Health Specialist with New York Sea Grant. That means I focus on fish and dabble in everything else that fits into that ecosystem health bucket. And next slide. As I mentioned, definitely not a linear path to get to where I am today. Next slide. Like many traditionally trained fish biologists, that is in fact me as a youth in overalls and the flannel shirt there. I grew up in rural, northern, kind of central New York, along the shores of Lake Ontario, one of the places I work today. And I was just fully immersed in the outdoors, but completely oblivious to the fact that this could become my career. I'm very grateful to the experiences I had in my childhood that allowed me the opportunity to get outdoors. I had older siblings that were dominating our dial-up internet connection at the time. So for entertainment, I was forced to roam kind of free and explore nature in that way that really kind of shaped how my career kind of unfolded later. Next slide. So this is a picture of me in high school. So I was participating in a program that they have here in New York called New Visions. It's an opportunity for juniors and seniors to pursue kind of a specialized track. So often it's in healthcare, but in this case, they also had an environmental science track, which I thought would be wonderful, but it was the very first year of this program. My senior year, my school, as I mentioned, was very small and rural and didn't have a lot of opportunities that many high schools now have, where you can take so many university credits while you're still a high school student. So I had taken basically all the credits I could and was pursuing this environmental science kind of opportunity. And it kind of just amounted into like weird field trips that I deemed at the time like kind of a waste of my time. So I convinced my parents to let me graduate half a year early. And I worked full time at a tackle shop called Fat Nancy's, which I can't imagine as a parent now being sold on this as a good idea. But my parents, luckily, were totally game for it. And ironically, like some of those folks at the tackle shop are now stakeholders that I engage with and work with now in my role at New York Sea Grant as an educator and science communicator. And that's a beautiful Lake Ontario Atlantic salmon that I did not catch. Next slide. So while I knew in my heart that, fish were for me, I love the Great Lakes, 100% sold on freshwater. I was a bit of a wayward soul in that I did not know where to go as an undergraduate student. I was a first generation college student. My parents were great in helping me navigate the system and apply to places. But to me, it seemed the smartest path to go to the highest bidder and just take the best scholarship that I was offered, which was not a good idea in hindsight, because they did not have any fisheries classes. I took oceanography at the State University of Oswego, which again is funny because I now live in Oswego. But so I did my first year of undergrad at SUNY Oswego and was miserable. I had always excelled in academics, did really, really well. I had a not so high GPA that I will not say on this recorded webinar, but kind of experienced my first big failure and felt like I really needed a rebirth. So instead of maybe exploring a study abroad, I did what I called my version of a study abroad and went to Michigan's smallest state school, Lake Superior State University, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the UP. And it was phenomenal. I was able to get that reset that I needed. I pursued every opportunity I could to volunteer, to do field work, to work with faculty there, and just kind of got reinvigorated and really seriously considering the fact that I couldn't be in school forever and that there had to be some sort of future waiting for me, and trying to decide what that was. It was not paying out-of-state tuition for the rest of my college career. So I did find my way back to New York, a very small, another state school in New York called the SUNY. So that's a state university, College of Environmental Science and Forestry. So this is a very niche, small school. It's like 6 buildings in the middle of Syracuse and like kind of nested within Syracuse University. And again, I just took every opportunity I could to volunteer and participate with my faculty members there. I was picking out like larval otoliths and aging fish and counting like daily growth rings. I was cleaning seine nets, basically doing anything I could to get more experience that I could fluff up my resume and CV with. So eventually I did graduate, which was amazing. So during every summer, aside from one during my undergrad, I was a seasonal with New York Sea Grant, where I now sit today. So I was working in the Eastern Lake Ontario region as kind of a roving science communicator along the river and in our unique dune ecosystem. And that opportunity came as a result of that high school program that I quit. One of our guest speakers before I quit was from Sea Grant, and I wrote them down in a notebook. And while I was at that Oswego University, I found the Sea Grant offices and would visit monthly, which I do not recommend now because it kind of makes you seem like a crazy person. But I would show up every month and remind them that I was really interested and hireable for a seasonal position. And I don't know if they just didn't have a lot of people applying or what, but they did end up hiring me for 3 summers. But then I graduated. Next slide. So that was graduating from my undergrad. And before these glamorous shots, I had the illustrious title of hatchery laborer at one of our local fish hatcheries, where I quickly learned that keeping fish alive was just not for me. So I was lucky enough to be a student, not a student contractor, a third-party contractor with the U.S. Geological Survey, the Great Lakes Science Center. And here is really where the magic happened for me. My network exploded. The opportunity to work on a large research boat, a 70-foot research vessel, was just second to none. And in the Great Lakes, not a ton of people get that opportunity. In the ocean, it's more common, but in the Great Lakes, there's kind of like a handful of these types of vessels. So I was doing week-long or more surveys where we were out on the lake, not so hardcore. We would come into port every night, but it felt wonderful to be on the water, over, I think one year I had 200 days that I was on the water. So this is on open water, or even working, collecting data on the ice, through the ice, I should say. So I was able to explore all different kinds of techniques and participate in the writing process. And through this interaction, I was questing for a full-time permanent position in an agency, in particular, the USGS. I love the work I did as a third-party contractor. I didn't get the same kind of benefits as my colleagues, and that was really important the older I got. So I worked as a third-party contractor for about 2 years. That's me testing out my survival suit. And those folks in the hard hats, one of them is me in the blue. And we have just pulled up an enormous catch of alewife, which are the primary prey fish species in Lake Ontario. Next slide. So again, I got to do all kinds of fun stuff, but I realized I needed to level up, and staying in that position, though it made me so happy to be there and to be outdoors at that level. Yes, I still had to enter data. Yes, there was still the drudgery of winter and lab work, but there was the freedom of the field, and I really, really liked it. Next slide. However, I was lucky. I did get a term position with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Lower Great Lakes office. So this is an office that is in Western New York. So I moved from Central New York to Western New York, which covered the Lower Great Lakes, being Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And there I was a field biologist where I led crews for an early detection monitoring program for invasive species, which meant I was still out in the field a whole bunch, collecting data. So we were electrofishing, but this was a term position, which meant it had an expiration date, and it wasn't something that I could spend my whole career doing unless I wanted to like really gamble that that could somehow be converted to permanent, or another job would open up, which at the time was pretty unrealistic. So after spending a year in that title, which was really important, to have a year as a biologist title. Next slide, I think. Yeah, I took a gamble and went back to graduate school after kind of a 5-year gap, which in hindsight was a tiny bit long of a break, but I was ready for the challenge and lucky that at the time the federal government had positions called pathways. So it was a way of hiring students that were still in school, allowing them to work reduced number of hours while pursuing their degree, and then graduate into a full-time federal career, which was my dream. It was my wildest dream come true. So of course I jumped on the opportunity, applied, competed for and got the position, and then got to play in Lake Ontario, learning how to analyze telemetry data, got experience writing manuscripts. But I did this while working that pathways position, and also having to be a graduate teaching assistant because I had no other way to get a tuition waiver. So I had to kind of work like 60 hours a week, which was difficult at the time, but very great motivation. So next slide. Once I graduated, and that was graduated with my master's degree, I graduated, I defended when I was 8.5 months pregnant, which was an awesome feeling because that was another extreme motivator, and kind of comical. But once yeah, I was like, this is high stakes. We're not leaving this room. So what a great feeling that was. I had gotten what I had been questing for, quite possibly my entire career, was having this full-time permanent job with folks that I respected, actually enjoyed working with, which isn't always the case. When you work on a research boat, you're kind of like living with your weird work family and like a floating RV. So you just really get to know people really well. And I loved it. But as I reflected on my job, I gravitated towards positions and opportunities where I could talk to people, I could engage with them. At the end of the day, after working on the boat, I would like hang out on the dock and kind of just like casually wait for like passersby and be like, hey, do you want to know what we're doing? Do you want to like see my samples? Come on board. Um, which isn't necessarily normal. I guess most of my colleagues wanted to run to the bar. It just brought me so much pleasure sharing the work that we did and introducing people to Great Lakes fishery science and audiences. You know, these were maybe community members who weren't anglers. They were just going for a walk, taking their kids out for a stroll. They weren't necessarily going to come across this any other way than with me being there. So these are glam shots of a big old lake trout and a medium-sized lake sturgeon. Next slide.
Stacy, really quick, I'm going to jump in super fast. I know you're wrapping up, but everyone has been super interesting so far, and we just want to make sure we have time for Martin as well. So yeah, if you can wrap up in the next minute, that'd be awesome. So we have some Q&A time. Thanks,
Yeah,
Stacy.
you got it. So basically the conclusion of the story is that after I quested my whole career for this permanent position, my current job with New York Sea Grant came up as a fisheries specialist. And I was riddled with guilt, applied, got it, and have never looked back. It was the best decision I have ever made. I love what I do. I was so worried that I wouldn't get to do research. I would, be turning my back on my colleagues. All these people that I've worked with over the years, even people from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan and beyond, they're still my colleagues and partners now. And taking that risk was the very best thing that I ever did. I think my last slide's just my kids, so you can skip that one.
We'll end on this with cute kid pictures. This is great. Thank you, Stacy. Loved hearing about your journey. And I know we're getting close to the end of time. So Martin, I wanted to make sure, of course, we're saving the best for last and have his presentation up and running. I know he'll be sharing his slides shortly. And then hopefully we have time for a quick Q&A, maybe one question at the end for all of our panelists before we say goodbye for the afternoon. But all right, Martin, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Martin Rivas. I'm born and raised from Texas, and I went to school there for undergrad. I'd like to talk about my coastal waterfront career journey on the Great Lakes. I work at Marsh Consultants. It's a civil engineering firm, and went to school at Texas A&M University, graduated in December 2019 with a bachelor's in ocean engineering. At that time, I thought I wanted to do offshore oil and gas in the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf, and I found a job working as a coastal engineer in Lake Michigan. At the time, Lake Michigan was experiencing record high water levels. All the Great Lakes were experiencing very high water levels, which meant a lot of coastal erosion. So there was a huge need for coastal engineering within the Great Lakes, particularly in Lake Michigan. I graduated from Notre Dame this past year with the master's in structural engineering. I told myself when I moved to the Midwest that I would do 2 years at this job, then I would move back to Texas. Well, I've ended up liking the civil coastal engineering world a whole lot better and working on Lake Michigan than I thought if I were to go in the oil and gas industry. So stuck around and decided to get my master's, and it was a master of engineering. It wasn't a thesis that I had to do, 30 credit hours of classwork and then a capstone. When I was at A&M, I marched in the Fighting Texas Aggie Band. I'm not sure if we have any football fans amongst us here today, but should be a fun football game this Saturday. Moving on, I'm a coastal engineer. I've been working at Marsh since February 2020, so that was right before COVID had happened. And I started my job, and then like 2 months after COVID, a month after, luckily I was able to keep my job and work remotely from home, which wasn't the best because learning the softwares that we use, such as Civil 3D, CAD, Revit, those all those softwares were hard to learn by myself, but that was a couple years ago now with COVID. Now I'm a licensed professional engineer practicing in Michigan and Indiana, and I'm in these professional societies here. The next slide, I'll talk more about them. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is professional licensure. I'm not sure if many of you know about this. I didn't really decide to do this until after I graduated school, but there is what's called the PE license, professional engineering, and to get that, you have to pass the FE exam and the PE exam. You can take the FE exam. Typically, it's designed for engineering undergraduate students, you can take that as soon as at the end of your junior year or at the end of your senior year. For those that might be engineers amongst us today, I would recommend scheduling that exam. It's about a 5-hour exam, and they've changed the standard since the last I've taken it. But the NCES has a good record of what all that stuff talks about. And then after you take the FE exam, it's intended that you gain 4 years experience, and then you can sit for your PE exam. And it varies by state as far as when you can take the PE exam, how much years experience you need to have to be qualified to get your license. But this is what I had to do for Michigan and Indiana. And after you get your license and you keep it, and you have to keep up with continuing education credits. It varies by state, but it's anywhere from 15 hours to 20 to 30 hours of whether that's webinar, recorded continuing education training opportunities, or in person. Professional societies, I've been involved in some of these since college. I'm looking at Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers, SNAME, and MTS. When I was at Texas A&M, they encouraged all the ocean engineering majors to join SNAME and MTS. And so this is mainly for those that are interested in doing naval architecture design, so like propulsion design, boat design, basically. And that's not the civil coastal world that I get to work into, but at the time in college, it was something that I thought I was going to be interested in doing. And this get into like subsea engineering systems for oil and gas, those types of things. Now I'm more actively involved in the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, in which they have different subchapters. There's COPRI and SEI. They have evolved over time, but they are subchapters within ASCE, and you can become a member through ASCE. You don't have to be a civil engineer. You can be any type of engineer. Also, I'm part of the National Society of Professional Engineers. It's just a professional society, and American Concrete Institute, Association of Marine Industries. There's so many different types of these professional societies. I didn't include these two here because I'm not involved in them, but this stands for, I believe, Association of American Ports, something. And then this is for, you can become a certified floodplain manager through this organization. I wanted to talk more about the FEPE exams. These are the exam specifications listed on the NCEES website. The ones I highlighted are the ones that are most applicable to my career that I've seen. Let's see, I took the FE exam after college. It was 3 years out of school, which I don't recommend. I had to dust off the cobwebs, especially 5 years out of undergrad to go jump into grad school. But for those that might want to think about, taking the FE exam, and then maybe later in the career they decide to do the PE exam, uh, that's something to think about. But you got civil engineering, environmental, naval art, marine engineering, and structural. Structural, it's its own animal. There's a license for that in and of itself, and that is particularly with the focus on bridges or buildings. So moving on from that, Abbott Marsh Consultants, I started working in our Benton Harbor office, which is Southwest Michigan, next to St. Joseph, Michigan. It's a really, really beautiful lake town there. So when I started, we had 120 employees. Now we have 250 employees, and these are our offices in Indiana and Michigan. I might be moving to the Grand Rapids, Michigan office, or I might negotiate if I could move back to Texas, my home state, and then have my firm open an office there for me in the next couple of years. I should mention that I went to school at Notre Dame and was going to school or working part-time here in South Bend. That's where I'm currently based out of. And my firm was able to help pay for my school. They met about like a third of my tuition, which was awesome. But I agreed to stay on for 3 years after I graduate. So that's job security. I work in our coastal waterfront group, been here since February 2020. My boss of 5 years actually left this firm in April. So now we're looking for that director role, but it just means that I have more experience. I'm going to zoom through this very quickly, but this is just the Great Lakes water levels and hydrology from what I've learned in my past couple of years being here. You've got all these Great Lakes. They're beautiful. The glaciers created them thousands of years ago. These basically the Lake Superior is higher elevation, Lake Michigan and Huron are at the same elevation, and they all are, there's these control structures, dams basically, or locks that control the hydrology of of the Great Lakes. The vertical datums, these numbers here are based on the IGLD vertical datum, but there's other vertical datums out there. I have experience on Lake Michigan and not so much the other lakes, but I wanted to really quickly show you this area between 1999 through about 2014 was a period of low water levels. So this red line is the mean average water level that the Army Corps of Engineers keeps track of. And for a long time, it was below that. It was during low water conditions. And then I highlighted over here in yellow was about the time when I moved here. And the last time it had been that high, well, if you go back to 1987, you're talking more than 30 years of change, where for a long period of time it was low water conditions. And typically when there's low water conditions, there's no erosion because there's beach there. But whenever there's high water conditions, you can get a lot of erosion really quickly. This is just a water levels chart that shows the forecast for the Great Lakes, and then this is just the projected envelope. So it could be anywhere from the top or the bottom. And 2020 was a crazy year. These are all the record peaks in 2020. So I got there right at the perfect time. The last time it had happened like this was in the 80s. And I just, fell in love with my job and I decided to stay. And I'm gonna zoom through this stuff really quickly, but high water level conditions. So this is a great example. This is a revetment project that I got to work on. It's a after picture, and I'll talk about very briefly about what we had to do here, but this was privately funded. It's really expensive, $4 million construction cost. It had to be done entirely from the lake. You got these timber tow piles down at the just below the water level there, and you have 900 linear feet of a cantilevered steel sheet pile seawall. And we used the Army Corps of Engineers manual to design it. And there was significant bluff erosion, so it also had portions of bluff stability. One thing I should make mention of is this is New Buffalo, Michigan, and if you can see this map here, this yellow dot is where New Buffalo, Michigan is. And this area at the top left of your screen is the New Buffalo Harbor, and everything south of this harbor is basically armored shoreline all the way down to Michigan City, Indiana, where it reaches. That's where people call it Michiana. But for a long time, especially since these high water conditions, there's basically no sand beaches around here. And there's other states that are not the Great Lakes that have initiatives for sand renourishment. It's a huge topic of discussion for coastal communities in this area, is how do we get more sand back? Because people love to use the beach. A lot of tourists use it. But right now there's not enough advocacy from the government level to get funds to help get beach nourishment. And also another thing, in other states, you could totally dredge out in the middle of the water to get sand and put it back on shore, but in Michigan, you can't do that. It's just written in their permitting regulations that you can't do that. One great thing about the Great Lakes that I love. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Emily.
Martin, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
This has been incredibly interesting so far. I realize that in the interest of time, we haven't gotten to our moderated Q&A, but because we have only have scheduled this webinar for an hour, everyone had such interesting presentations. We are going to actually wrap up here.
Okay.
I wanted to thank all of our speakers for presenting today. And we can share slides with anyone that is interested in learning more about all of your different organizations. And we encourage everyone to reach out and connect with our speakers today via LinkedIn. If they have any follow-up questions, if they want to learn more about their journeys, want some advice, or to do some extra networking, because we didn't get to our Q&A today, and we want to make sure everyone is allowed to continue their afternoon. We would encourage everyone to follow up that way. So we are posting a post webinar survey as well. And yeah, we wanted to thank everyone for coming. We have more webinars coming up. This is just the first of many. So please be on the lookout for our ECOP September newsletter. We also will be sharing some more updates on our LinkedIn and on Slack. So want to just give one last round of applause for our speakers. Thank you, Martin, Zach, Stacy, and Katie. It was truly so interesting learning about your different career paths and about all of your different organizations. I will be following up with all of you to learn a little bit more as well. And with that, thank you everyone as well. Thank you to all of our attendees, and we'll end there. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks so
Bye.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.